All right, welcome to another DFW Running Talk. I'm Chris Detzel, and today we have special guest Andy Wheatcroft. Is it Craft? Wheatcroft? Let me read you that.
Wheatcroft, close enough.
Yeah, Andy Wheatcroft. Andy, how are you?
I am great, thanks. So glad to see you.
Yes, good to see you, man. And you just got back from a really cool marathon in Tokyo, so we'll talk about that here in a minute. You've done all kinds of different things, so that's pretty cool. So really, I wanted to get to know you a little bit today. Talk a little bit about your kind of running journey, how you got into running, why you started to run, all that kind of stuff. And then we'll get back into the six major world majors that you've already done and completed. That's super exciting. But first, let's go back.
Sure. Although I'm what you might call a mature runner, hence the grey hair. My running
That's
journey,
true.
yeah, thanks a bunch. My running journey doesn't actually go that far. So for me, when I was growing up in the UK, I used to play more rugby and cricket in my school, and running was always a punishment. So it was something to be avoided at all costs. And so I eventually started running, I want to say about 14 years ago over in the UK. And so for me, it was probably about the fifth time in my life that I tried to run. I indoors fizzled after 2 or 3 weeks for whatever reason. And I just happened to have three really strong motivators. One was we just had our second child, a son who was 2 years old. I was pretty overweight back then. I was 50 pounds
Wow.
overweight. Yeah. I used to have a goatee beard that I thought used to hide my double chin.
Probably
Yeah.
more so, but it didn't hide the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got two sons by that time. I was overweight. My father died suddenly with a heart attack, age 60, like weeks after he retired, which was a significant shock to the
That's
system,
terrible.
if you like. And it was lifestyle derived atherosclerosis. At the same time, I was thinking about starting to run. I had another attempt, and all of these things came together to get me running. And then my eldest son, sorry, was 7, came back from school, and he told me that one of his little buddies had brain cancer and needed proton therapy in the US. Apparently, there was only one machine in the world that was able to save him, and it was in Detroit or somewhere. And so I somehow volunteered to raise money at a 5K. That was one of the things that really helped me stay motivated initially. And so I started running, and it was awful. I could run
Usually
100
it is.
feet. Yeah, I could run 100 feet, and I was thrown up by the side of the road. I had a
Throwing
2 foot.
up, that's pretty harsh. You just jog a little bit and you throw up.
Oh yeah, lungs burning, legs burning. I was
Jeez.
so unfit. It wasn't even funny.
How times have changed. It's crazy to hear the story.
Yeah, I'm no athlete. I think I'm more about mental toughness than being an actual athlete. But I had this 2.1 mile circuit that I used to measure how many times I stopped and walked. And after about 3 months, I eventually ran the whole way around it, and that was pretty cool. It was I used to run past a park with a bunch of teenagers in there. Because he was in England, I always used to get some sarcastic abuse. The movie Run, Fat Boy Run was on in the cinemas at the time to date it, which
No
was
way.
a favourite thing. And then the day that I ran 2.1 miles without stopping, one of them shouted, "Michael Jackson's dead." And I remember thinking at the time, that's an interesting turn of abuse. And this was in the days before internet. And at a quarter of a mile later, I walked into my house, and my wife said, "You'll never guess what." And I said, "Yeah, Michael Jackson's died."
Yeah.
And she said, "How'd you know that?" Friends in the park told me. So I became a runner the day
My
Michael
friends.
Jackson died. So
Wow.
yeah, that was a precursor to my 5K. A few months later, I signed up to a 10K. And then a few months after that, I got signed up to a half marathon, all the time raising money for various charities. And then there was a children's charity that my company sponsored at the time in the UK, had places at the London Marathon, which was about 5 months later. And so I got one of those places. And again, it was a charitable spot. So I ended up raising, I don't know, 20 grand or so for getting to London.
It's quite a bit of money to just raise.
Yeah, my goal was 5K, but apparently I'm really annoying and I'm not afraid to ask people for money. So it worked out really well.
If you have some, I'll take it. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah, so I really just motivated myself through a series of escalating distances. And in the space of a year and a half, I was ready to run London.
That's funny though, that's an awesome story. And I have somewhat of I would say similar, but the reason I started running 11, 12, 13 years ago was I was a little bit overweight. And every single day I decided I was going to jog a little 1 mile until I can start running a mile. And then start running 5K, 10K, et cetera. And then eventually I lost 25 pounds in 4 or 5 months. And it was quick and it was easy. I say easy, but then I never stopped. But I think it's interesting that big runners seem to do that they go too far. And you
Yeah.
tell me if I'm wrong. It's okay. I'm going to run a half or a marathon, and then I'm going to do 5 marathons that same year. You know what I mean? And so hopefully you didn't do that, but I've seen that a lot. And then they get injured, and then so keep going.
Yeah, it nearly stopped for me at the half marathon point, actually, because the half marathon was in like November 2010. And I got really severe shin splints, bad enough that I eventually found a surgeon that would operate on them. I actually had a procedure to remove my shin muscle, shave the bone fragments off, stick it back together. And at the time, I said, "Can we hurry up and do this, please? Because I've got my first marathon in 5 months." And the doctor,
That sounds dumb.
it does sound a little bit dumb, but the doctor said, "Well, the good news about this procedure is it's only soft tissues." He said, within a month, you'll be run walking again. So my training for London was a little bit short, but to your point, Chris, actually, I'd seen that with a lot of friends who'd hit running too hard and injured themselves out. And I had this early warning near miss, which a surgeon happened to save for me. But then it made London really hard. And I joked that the only reason I did more than one marathon was because when I bonked at mile 20 in London, apart from teaching myself a few new swear words, I kept visualizing
they're new. I think I know them all.
Yeah, you go to a place, what am I doing it for, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the children's charity, which was a worthy thing. And my wife gave me 2 beautiful sons and all that sort of thing. And then I remember that they gave my wife drugs in job, and so maybe it wasn't that bad. And then I bumped again. And I remember saying to myself, because I was on a path to go sub 4 in my first marathon, which was great. And I kept saying, look, if I do this thing sub 4, I'm never going to do this again. And as luck would have it, I was a failure, and it was like 4 hours 12 and some change. So I had
the right mode.
So I had to do another one. So there we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. And although there was a charity aspect to it, I didn't really think anything about running London. It was my home big marathon. I managed to get in. I didn't really have any other ambitions beyond it. It was a lifetime dream, I suppose, and it was a great experience. But the last 6 were very forgettable.
But to say, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, like everybody's first marathon, it's a question of whether you love it or not. I guess you find out whether or not you do. And so I did.
So you were in London, and so what happened after? Were you?
Yeah, so afterwards, we moved to the US in a few months later in July to Peoria,
Was it work?
Illinois.
Was it work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was an executive with Caterpillar. So our headquarters was in Peoria, Illinois, which is the reason we went to Peoria, Illinois. No offense, Peoria. And I started running with a couple of, as you do, you always find a pocket of running friends. So I started running with friends up there.
Were they executives also at Caterpillar, or was it just running people?
Mostly running store related. There was one big running store in Peoria, and so everybody coagulated around there. And so we did that. And back then, Chicago was a first come, first served entry. So I thought, well, I've done London, I'll do Chicago. So in 2012.
Perfect. You lived there.
I lived there. I had a placeholder on my calendar to know when the website opened. I went to the website and I logged on and paid, and I got a place before they filled up a day later.
Nice.
Pretty easy. So I ran for about 6 or 7 months, I think I put into the training. I was really cautious about my injury in the first one and how badly it went. So I paid a lot of attention to training. And so I ran Chicago and just.
All right. So quick question before, because I'm interested in, and as I start talking to more and more people and people that seem to be more successful at running marathons successfully and not bonking it, they run a lot of miles, right? Like for them, it's about 80 to 120 miles a week, especially like to the folks I talked to yesterday, like the elite like people. But there's something said for the long miles. So, what was your philosophy then? And then we'll get to your philosophy later. Maybe we could talk about some of that.
Yeah. I really had 2 running lives. There's my pre-Boston qualifying life, and then there's my regular person life, if you like. So I was still in regular person discovering mode, if you like. And so for me, I was using stock standard plans like a Hal Higdon or something like that. It was Hanson's method I got into as well. So I was topping out probably, maybe I did 40, 45 miles a week at the top end of. My mileage base I saw as 20 to 25 miles. And I was building slowly. And I was running most of my miles too quickly. The tempo, of course, pace, pulling muscles along the way and recovering collateral damage.
As we all do.
I just thought that's the way that you did it. And I got into Chicago. I did the training. I pulled a muscle 6 weeks out. I just about got recovered for the start line. But my youngest son had a speech and language delay. And so we took him to a number of places to be checked out because we didn't know what it was. And one of the children's charities we went to did a bunch of tests and didn't really find anything. It ended up that he was on the autism spectrum, but I decided that I would just raise money for them at Chicago since I was running it anyway. So I raised about $4 or $5 grand, even though I'd got a place I didn't need to. So I raised $4 or $5 grand for those guys.
I feel like you're slacking, man, because you did 20,000 and
it was a last minute decision thing.
Okay, it's still pretty good then.
But at the time, I was finding I used to get early running. Everything was difficult. I wasn't really running with people often in the week, for example. And I really needed it for motivation. The fact that I was running for something else and all that. So I got to the start line in 2012. Chicago is a great marathon. For those people that don't know it, it's a round robin marathon. It starts and finishes in Grant Park in a really downtown Chicago in the Loop. It's great for spectators. You go north 3 miles, back 3 miles.
It really is.
3 miles. So you hit the town center a couple of times. So for spectators, it's really
But
great.
you got trained several times to go see your person when Leah ran it. I had some friends that knew Chicago really well, and I just followed them and went place to place to see her. So it was cool.
You must have seen her 4 or 5 times, I would imagine.
I did.
Plus the finish. So
I missed her once because there were so many people there. I was like,
that's the downside. Everybody does it, so it's really crowded. It's a pretty flat marathon. It's a bit of a beast because you lose GPS a lot because of the downtown configuration and the bridges. But it's a pretty flat marathon. The only, for people who want to run it, I've ran Chicago twice. I also ran it in 2014. But for me, when you turn left out of Chinatown at mile 20, you look up Michigan Avenue, and Michigan Avenue is slightly uphill. It's like the last 3 or 4 miles of the marathon, really. But it just looks like it goes on forever. And I bonked up there just mentally. I couldn't deal with it. It was 22 miles. Yeah. And this road just looked like it went on forever. And so to me, I like the marathon, but I don't like Chicago because twice I've been on the start line pretty fit and twice I've not come away with the times. But
you didn't finish? Is that what you're saying? Or
I did finish, but I didn't. I didn't hit my time goals both times. I did go sub 4 in that 2012 marathon. I did 3 hours 51 or something like that. So
what are you complaining about? That's a PR.
I know, but my run 3 weeks earlier was better than my training. But still,
but it sounds like a pretty good marathon. Probably didn't go good, but you PR'd by 20 something minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was good. And I licked my wounds like you do. And you think about what can I do next time.
I feel like you're just never going to be happy with any marathon you do. Is this going to be the story of the rest of the time?
Yeah, I do eventually start to like them, but...
Okay, got it.
Yeah, but I don't know how...
You're not from the UK, so you just have that mentality.
Pain and discomfort build character where I come from. That was my school motto, but...
Yeah. All right.
So that led to me then deciding that actually I should try for New York. New York was a lifelong dream because of Fred Lebow, and Fred Lebow being the original innovator of big city marathons and how you make the finances work and how you get a mayor to close your city down for a day. Chicago replicated a lot of his stuff. London copied it directly. Berlin did, and so on. And so I went in the lottery and I wasn't successful. But then my wife mentioned to this charity that I'd run that I was the anonymous donation. And so they called me in to thank me. And the short version of that story is I thought I was going to meet 6 old ladies for a cup of tea in a room somewhere. Turned out there was like 1,000 people in a hotel with their annual fundraising kickoff thing. And they said, "Oh, yeah, you did say you'd talk, Andy." So I ended up giving a microphone. And I wandered up to this microphone and I said, "Look, politely, you guys are dumb as a box of rocks because you don't have a marathon fundraising activity. Yeah, you're aware of the fundraising engine you don't have." And in the end, I said, "Look, I'll help you start one, but the only rule is I need 50 people to sign up. And secondly, I get to choose which is our first big city marathon that we run." And so that
you got it in New York.
So I applied for 20 places. We got 10 in New York that year in 2013.
Wow.
And we took a team of 10 people. I think we raised $120,000 as a team that year.
Look at you, man. Yeah, go get her.
And again, it helped. It made it a lot of fun. It introduced me to group running a little bit more because of the team aspect of it. I went around New York through my time by a couple of minutes. It was New York, but New York still one of my favorite of the majors because of the city, partly because it's a journey all the way from Staten Island through the 6 boroughs all the way to Central Park. Partly because it's difficult. I like the fact that those hills, those 6 bridges are a pain in the ass and that it makes it hard.
Did you like it then though? 2013?
Yeah. In 2013, it was really cool because it was the year after Sandy, so it was cancelled the year before, and it was a few months after the Boston bombings.
That would be special.
Yeah, you might have heard me say this on a run, but the moment of silence before the gun was like the birds in the car stopped singing. It just went dead.
Love that.
I still get goosebumps thinking about it now.
Yeah.
And then to run New York's awesome. The crowd is wild, literally wild. If you put your name on your jersey, you have to move to the middle of the road to have a break from people shouting your name. It is unlike anywhere else that I've gone from that perspective. They say that New York people aren't very friendly, but the New Yorkers say that they are friendly, they're just busy. And on Marathon Sunday, they're not busy.
People from all over the world come. How do you know they're just from New York, right?
Yeah.
They're just from all over.
Yeah. Well, Staten Island, but yeah. So yeah, you go through the 6 boroughs, and they're all very different, and it's just an amazing race. And I remember almost every step of that. Running through the Bronx is pretty cool. There's again, for anybody who's not run New York, one of the reasons you have to do it is that mile 16, there's a bridge called Queensboro Bridge, which is quite tough. It's the lower deck of a bridge that they close off, and so you go from this crazy crowd hearing support to just quiet. And it's almost meditative. You hear his like breathing and footsteps. It's like running with your friends again, just for a minute. You get halfway over the bridge and you look left and you see you're crossing to Manhattan for the first time. And it's mile 16. You're not there, but you're a good way in. And then as you come over the bridge, there's a 270-degree ramp to get you back down onto First Avenue, which is where most of the traveling families are. And the crowds attend. There's a grandstand. There's probably 10,000 people around that quarter mile. You go from this absolute quiet to this almost Super Bowl roar as you go under this tunnel. It echoes. Again, it's just a huge moment. New York, for me, has quite a few of those moments.
That's awesome.
And then you get back to Central Park, and that's tough. But you kind of get there.
I love how you tell that whole story.
You go through the Bronx and you come back up Fifth Avenue, which is beautiful. You go past the statue of Fred Lebow, back into Central Park. The crowd's 10, 15 deep and roaring, literally. And that finish is just like nowhere else. They're all good for different reasons, but New York's great for that reason. Yeah, so I finished New York in 2013. It was just an amazing experience. And then I ended up doing Chicago at some point later on in 2014. And that was really at that time the end of my majors gig, because I thought about the Abbott Marathon majors, but I never really correlated that to something that I could actually get done. I was still a beginner runner. I just happened to have run 3 marathons. I still wasn't getting the last 6 miles. My training wasn't right. And then a year before, my Boston story, which was my next adventure, if you like, really came from the bombings. And so I had a friend who made it down the finish chute by a minute when the bombs went off. And a year later, she was still struggling with PTSD and agoraphobia and so on.
Wow.
And it was again, she wasn't physically injured, and I know a lot of people were more severely affected, but it really affected me. And so I decided that I'm not going to run any more majors until I run Boston. And then the day afterwards, because I was still new, I just knew that Boston was a major. I didn't really know any history. And I discovered for the first time that was like an hour and 15 off qualifying. So a little bit of a oh shit moment. And but I said, no, screw it. So I said about significantly, to your point earlier, increasing my mileage. And I said I'm on a quest to qualify for Boston. And I did other marathons like Marine Corps and the Air Force Marathon and a bunch of other really great marathons, but I kept getting close and then getting injured and then recovering and getting close and getting injured. And then eventually we moved to Dallas in 2021, late 21, early 22. And so that's when I literally bumped into the first weekend I was here, White Rock Running Co-op. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you've been running with them for a little bit.
Yeah, 3+ years now. And for me, I'd never really run with a group that big before,
Yeah.
that diverse. And as there's the Dallas running scene is awesome. I think most of us that watch your podcast really, really like that you do it, Chris, because again, Dallas is a great running scene. And this is a great way to connect those worlds together as well and to showcase the depth and breadth of running talent that we have in Dallas. It's just a really great scene. All of a sudden, I had a group of 10, 12, 20 people I could run with almost every day. Big group runs on Saturday, social events, run my hood. I felt spoiled. I was able to run with people like Nick and Alan Shelburne and Scott Manis and many others.
I think Nick's an animal.
Yeah, he's a beast. He's a beast. Yeah, in fact, when I first got here, I thought I'd never run with him. I'd never be able to with the mileage or the pace or anything. But those guys really took me from seeing 25 miles to somewhere near 50 miles as being a base number.
Yeah.
And I'm a stubborn individual. I'm not very coachable. I am determined, but I quickly found out that all I have to do a marathon schedule is just run with White Rock because we do the track on Tuesday, hills on Wednesday, long run Saturday, easy runs in between. It's like that's a marathon schedule. So I started basically doing a marathon schedule like all the time.
Yeah.
And then after running, I think it was the Phoenix Mesa Marathon 22, I was BQ shape and I don't know. I just got it wrong. I just completely got it wrong on the day. I got my pacing strategy wrong. But I don't think I wasn't really being intelligent about my long run back then. And I came back all pissed from that. And then I randomly bumped into Andrea Hudson Baldwin, who is also one of the many legendary runners here in Dallas. We just happened to be running a similar schedule. I was going to try again at Glass City in Detroit in September. And she was on another marathon around the same time. And we started running long runs together. She also wanted to do 2 or 3 miles more than I got planned. So, okay. It's a bit like running with Nick. Whatever you got planned, Nick's always got a bit more. But then she introduced me to the fact that not only were we doing long runs, that we were doing structured long runs with negative loading in there. I said, what do you mean? She said, we're going to put some longer tempos in at the back end of the run. And I'd never really done that before. I'd only ever seen the long run as something that you just had to check off.
Yeah.
I'd never really structured it. So we went as high as doing a 24-mile long run with Andrea, which I'd never done before. Yeah. And not only did we do a 24-mile long run, it was like 3-4 miles easy, 4 at marathon pace, and then 2 easy, then 5 at marathon pace, then 2 easy, and then 6 or 7 at marathon pace, and then cool down.
That's a tough day.
Yeah. And so she guilted me into it. She's there's a silent assassin. She really is. She looks all sweet old lady, but
that's right.
She's really mean, but in a good way. And that like really transformed me. So I went up to Glass City from being 10, 15 minutes out of my BQ time. And I was a lot fitter. And I remember running Glass City after that set, thanks to Nick and Scott and Julie and Javier and everybody else I ran with. But in particular, Andrea helping me on the more intelligent long run aspect of it.
Yeah.
And I remember setting off at Glass City and I needed 3:35 for my BQ time, which was just like an 8-minute 6, 8-minute 7 pace. And so I'd set my target to 3:30. And I'd also figured out that I needed an ABC goal. That what most people do, and you probably see this, Chris, too, is that everybody generally sets their A goal as being the best time they think they can do, which often they're not really trained for anyway. And so you end up bonking. It's a guaranteed bonk. So my strategy was, I think I'm 3:30 fit. So that's going to be my A strategy. My B strategy is going to be 3:35. I need to at least qualify. And my C strategy was 3:25. And people used to say to me, yeah, but surely you've got that the wrong way around. And I said, no, I've got this whole mental process where I want to try negative taper, at least flat taper. And in my mind, I've got this little subroutine that says at mile 20, if I'm on pace and I'm feeling good, I go to this mental filing cabinet and I open the top drawer, and in the top drawer is a shoe box, and inside the shoe box is a little jewelry box, and inside the jewelry box is a little slip of paper, and it just says, go for it, dickhead, which was my code for plan C, right? So for me, I didn't really even want to think about plan C. Unless I checked all the boxes about mile 20, and it was a reality. So I remember going to Glass City, but by this time I'd run probably 12 marathons. I'd got 1 or 2 almost right, but not quite. And I just set up at 7:45 from mile 1, and I dropped the 3:30 pacer about 12 miles in. not by much, but just by I just creeping away from. And I got to mile 20 and it was like an out of body experience. I didn't feel like it was me running because I couldn't believe that I was still pumping out the splits.
That's great.
And then I remembered plan C because after about 20 miles, I did the math and I thought, even if I do nines from here to the end, still going to do 3:35.
Yeah.
And I remembered plan C and I thought, oh, okay, let's have a crack. And so I pushed it. I did a couple of 7:20s and my last 5K was my quickest 5K.
Wow.
And
That's
I
right.
ended up with 9-minute cushion.
Great.
And I'm telling you this story as though I'm telling it about somebody else because I still don't believe it was me that ran the 1,000 miles. So,
That's pretty impressive, man.
and it was pretty much
Plan
10
C
years-
worked.
Well, it was pretty much 10 years to the day since the bombs went off in Boston.
Wow.
And a few months later, I made the commitment to do it. It took me exactly 10 years to qualify.
Yeah.
So yeah, you were probably around then. I think that, if I know, I'd not met you then. I didn't meet you till Boston. I'll tell that story in a minute. But everybody who knows me knows that I bought all sorts of Boston gear. My wife even made me a little Boston unicorn trophy.
Your wife made it? That's
Yeah.
pretty awesome.
She's an artist. I'm an engineer. It's a strange household. But
I knew you're an engineer, and Leah and I were talking about that yesterday or today. I was like, yeah, I talked to Andy today, and he gets really deep into these things. He goes, yeah, he's an engineer, I bet. I go, yeah, I think so.
yeah, sorry about that. But
No worries.
and for anybody wanting to qualify for Boston, by the way, Glass City is one that's really worth considering. The climate where it is, it's September, it's in Detroit, it's flat to rolling, it's a really generous gradient, one small hill for about half a mile. So for me, it really worked. And Scott Mannis came with me as well that weekend. I think he needed to run a state, but it tells you a lot about the group of people that we run with, that you can go to marathons and people from the group will be with you or tracking you online, but often physically with you.
Yeah,
it's
pretty cool.
Different places. So then I got Boston done and I thought about nothing else for nearly a year, nearly 9 months than just getting ready for Boston.
That's pretty awesome, man. I love that story. You made it happen. So congrats.
Yeah, and I still can't believe I did it, but apparently I did.
What year was that?
So that was September 23. And then as I was training for Boston, I decided actually early on that I was going to try and respect the race and I wanted to run it. I didn't want to walk up any of those hills, but I wanted to enjoy it. I wanted to see it as a victory lap. I'll race the second one if I ever do a second one.
Isn't that where I met you? Like
Yeah.
we had dinner
with
with
Alan.
Alan and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's where I met you and Leah, I think, for the first time. We at the last minute decided to go. In fact, I was joking about WRRC because when I first came to Dallas, I used to describe WRRC to my friends who didn't live in Dallas as like the Cheers bar of the running community.
Yeah.
Everybody's welcome. And we were joking about dinner and we settled on Cheers bar before the marathon. And I think Alan taught you guys into going there. And that's where I met you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I figured. So that was when you first did Boston. Now, I guess you could talk about Boston, but did you do Berlin later or when?
Later, yeah. So again, I got,
later.
yeah, I'm all about mental discipline and emotional intelligence. As Andy, the executive, talking, but like I'd intentionally told myself that I couldn't do Berlin or Tokyo until I'd done Boston.
Got it.
That was like a mental sort of incentive, if you like.
I want to go back. I want to ask a more personal question because I'm a little curious because you're pretty much retired now, right?
Mhm.
So when did you retire? And I ask that because you could put a lot of time and effort into running if you're retired or in other things that you want to do. But
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that and then go into Boston and think?
Sure.
I'm a little curious.
Sure, yeah. So I guess I was retired for my last two, technically. But yeah, so let me finish Boston and then I can.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Then chronologically, I can go retirement and then into Boston.
Okay,
so,
good.
So I can address all of your.
It's the engineer in you.
Yeah, sorry. I've got to follow a process, Chris. You
All right,
you
go.
trip out.
Sorry.
Everybody knows about my infamous OCD behavior. But anyway,
It's
so,
the executive in you.
and thanks for accommodating me, Chris. I appreciate it. But yeah, so again, Boston, for those of you that haven't run Boston that are listening to this as well, one of the questions everybody asks, is it worth it? And I would say for me, I made it a big deal. It doesn't have to be. I made it a big deal, but I would say it was definitely worth it. I stayed at the Copley. I met Billy Allen, police superintendent Billy Allen, and bought him a drink at the bar. Billy Allen's the police superintendent that ran the marathon that day and then came back and did a 72-hour shift. And he was one of the guys with a gun in his hand that got the left-hand sole out of the boat. So I met him in a bar and bought him a drink in Boston. So for Boston, it's about the weekend. It's like an Olympic Village feel. It's just a great vibe. And the race is pretty cool too. So yeah, and I remember bursting into tears. There's a few pictures of me actually in tears as I turn left onto Boylston Street from Hereford. It's just
Wow.
just overwhelming. The moment you reflect on watching it all those times on TV,
Yeah.
and now you're doing it, and you kind of remember what it took to get there. And for me, I chose not to take a phone because I wanted to just absorb the day. I took a silk lily, white lily in my fanny pack, and I stopped about 20 feet before the finish line. Is the first memorial to the bombings right by the side. So for my friend, I stopped about 20 feet before the finish line, and I put that silk flower on the monument just for her, really. A mental hook, because it was quite a tough day. So it probably helped me get up a couple of hills that I might have bonked on. So maybe it was a net gain, I don't know. But for me, it was, there's pictures of me striding over the barrier somewhere, and all these photographers, where the hell's he going?
That's a great story. I love that. That's really great.
Yeah, I'm still trying to find the photo. Apparently the two cameramen who were there, I've been through 3 agencies, were BAA contract photographers. So I'm still trying to track down the photo from below me, but still. But yeah, crossing the finish line is huge. It's everything you think it might be, because unlike the other marathons, Boston requires something of you to be there. You can't just do a lottery and get there. There's no disrespect to it. Any marathon is a huge deal, but Boston, there's lots of little extra meaningfulness points, if you like, or hooks.
Yeah, part of it took you 10 years to do it, to qualify. And you qualified. And you ran it. And plus a lot of other things, like you mentioned, were going on. Wow. What a story.
Yeah. So I was working back then. So I will answer your question, Chris. But yeah, so I was working, and as you say, it's spinning plates and running on business trips and around airports and stuff and all that sort of thing. But then a few months later, I retired, and I semi-retired. Teach at UT, and I have a couple of charity director positions that I do a little bit of consulting, but I mostly do that when it suits me and not the other way around. So
that's the way it should be, right?
Yeah, exactly. But ironically, I still run the same schedule that we ran together this morning at the track. I find it helps me with my routine, but it also means I can get my run done. I can do 8, 9, 10, 12 miles before 7 a.m.
Yeah.
And I can still be back to take my youngest son to school, which is a neat thing. One of the reasons I retired.
Yeah.
Now, 16-year-old, I get to take him to school every day, and he has to talk to me for 20 minutes.
That's right.
There is no escape. Yeah, but
I like that.
But yeah, so for me, the ability to be mostly retired, to your point, it really helps. It helps with recovery more than anything, because I can take a nap for an hour in the middle of the day if I want to. And I do quite often.
Yeah, I would.
Famously, Roger Federer used to sleep, 11 hours a day? Because he credits his longevity of his career with a solid 8.5 hours every night, doing some training in the morning, actually having a nap in his schedule for 2.5 hours in the middle of the day, and then doing more training in the afternoon.
Like a professional athlete. That's what he does.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, and I think the retirement thing, to me, you mentioned I'm an engineer, so I'm a bit OCD and sequential about things, but I think running suits my personality, because you have to be running a marathon in particular is really about solving problems. You have your own physical ability, but the way you get through the training, the way you deal with tough spots in the training, your strategy on race day, all of the things that can go wrong and how you compensate for them. To me, I love marathon running because it provides an outlet for that problem solving gene that I've got.
There's a lot of engineers in that run. I know a lot of them. Like, I don't spend like that much effort and time into like you do and others. Even Leah's not an engineer, but she's very meticulous about her training, what she does. And I'm just like, I ran 30 or 40 miles. It's fine.
Yeah. But one thing that has happened is my running's gone up to 70-mile weeks, and I'm probably going to back off to 50 miles and try and see that as a base. But thanks to running with, Nick, we'll say his name 3 times, Nick, he'll probably appear fairly soon.
See you tomorrow, I guess.
Yeah, you just, as I say, there's always people to run with between PRC, DRC, White Rock, Pegasus, the Bagel Run on Wednesday, all of that stuff.
Tons of
Dallas is just so rich with multi-running group and meeting friends opportunities. I just somehow have got to a place where I can do 12 miles a week, 3 or 4 times in the week, and a long run and a Saturday late loop, and it adds up to 70 miles.
Yeah.
It's shocking, but yeah. So I was able to put that kind of base into and build that sort of base into Berlin. So once I finished Boston, I was sat at home thinking, now I can finish my 6 stars. And this was like late April. And I'm also not very patient. I guess that's the executive thing. So I don't do patience. And as I was saying, I was able to build my mileage base up quite a bit. And at the same time, shortly after Boston, I figured, why wait? So after several hours searching the internet, I found a local charity with spots available for Berlin in September.
Oh,
So I thought, screw it, let's do Berlin in September. So we got that done, and I managed to get into Berlin, and I had a great time in Berlin. The whole weekend was awesome. We had a group of about 20 plus people from the Dallas area on a Facebook page that were over there. So there was a bunch
wow.
of bumping into people that I knew half the time.
That's awesome.
The charity that I ran with was also a kids charity for the kids, which took me to, I think, $200,000 in my fundraising career over running these marathons, which was kind of
Pretty
neat.
impressive.
But the patron of that charity was Uda Pippig, who's kind of the Dina Caster of Germany, if you like. Real marathon aficionados, you'll know that Uda Pippig actually won Boston 2 or 3 times in the 80s. She
Oh, really?
won the
Wow.
inaugural Berlin Marathon after reunification. She was their Olympic star marathon athlete in Germany. And so she was a bit of a rock star over there. So I got to meet her, which was cool, at a charity function. And Berlin was a perfect day, weather-wise.
Awesome.
We'd just come off the summer, so as in Dallas, you can't really do a lot of speed work on long runs in the summer because you just can't. So I didn't really know what my fitness was, and I just started running. I thought, let's give 3:30 a crack, because I've only gone sub 3:30 once in my life, and I felt like I was in good shape thanks to my increase in mileage and the variety and running with psychos like Nick and Javier and the crew. Again, I think because of the mileage base, I just stuck 7:45 pace, and I kept clicking them off, and
That's great.
the interesting thing about Berlin is, because it's European, there are no mile markers, there are only kilometers. So I was just using my average mile pace, and it was auto lapping. I really hadn't got a clue where I was on the course. I was just looking at my average mile pace, and I was just every mile trying to do 7:45s. And eventually I worked out that we got to the 3K mark. I thought that means we're quite close into the marathon, and I'm feeling okay. So I had another moment and pushed it again. And it got a little bit tough towards the end because you zigzag back up to the Brandenburg Gate, but it's still fairly flat. And then you turn left and you see the Brandenburg Gate. To the finish line's quarter of a mile after that. And I was looking at my watch thinking, I'm way below 3:30. And I ended up doing another 3:26 at Berlin. So I ran another BQ at Berlin. So I guess there's something into running more mileage.
I think so. I do think so. Are you going to do Boston again, or because you BQ'd? Or?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. And I suppose that also segues into the last of my 6 stars, Sunday before last. But I would love to do Boston again. And this time I would go for a time. I would give it a crack since it's not my first one. It's not a victory lap anymore. But my cushion's like 3 minutes, 39 seconds, which should be enough, but it might not be. So we'll see.
That's true.
So
We'll see.
After Berlin, I did the same thing for Tokyo. I thought, why wait for Tokyo? With Tokyo, I thought the chances are so low of getting in on the ballot. Let's not even do that. And in Tokyo, it's different to everywhere else. The charity portion of the entry process is first, and then there's the general entry ballot. I don't want to leave it to chance. So again, I did another charity commitment, if you like, to run it, and secured that quite quickly after Berlin. And so I thought I'll just keep my mileage up. And running through winter really helped as well. And so I kept my base up. I signed up to pace the Dallas Full in December, 4-hour pace group as an incentive to keep my miles up as well, which was a lot of fun. And I was probably in the best shape of my life, actually. 20% better than Glass City, 30% better than Berlin. I was feeling really good. And then I was feeling optimistic going into Tokyo. And again, the beauty about the marathon is that it's never guaranteed. It doesn't matter. And firstly, it was a huge buzz being in Japan. It's like completely everything's alien. And the only thing that you know is that you're running 26 miles in a couple of days. Everything, it shows you how screwed up life is or how upside down life is. And it's really cool in Japan. I love Japan. But like when the most sensible thing you're doing that week is 26.2 miles one day, it shows you how crazy everything else is. But yeah, so again, Tokyo's great, really flat. really well organized. A few quirks, like they don't have waves. They just do one big 37,000 person start. There's no gaps in between the waves. So it's really busy, but it's really flat, really well supported. But unfortunately, it was hot. The end temps were with the sunlight were like 70 plus degrees. And that was like from the last hour and a half of the marathon. And so I set off pretty well. I was clicking out 737 miles. I was tracking to go sub 325, a sensible first half at 1 hour 44. I thought, okay, now I can negative split. And then just before then, one of the quirks of Tokyo, which is cool if you ever get to run it, is there's 3 switchbacks. It's a point to point, but the start and finish are only 6 miles apart. And they do that by having quite a lot of these 3 180-degree turnarounds. The advantage of that is that at about 11, 12 miles, you get to see the leaders run past you the other way, which is really quite rare. And it's really a spectacle to
pretty awesome
feel
to see
it as well as see it. They're running the opposite way, and boy, are they running. It's a brilliant sight to see. But I wasn't concentrating and I tripped up. So I did a fairly spectacular fall, skinned my knee, banged my back and twisted it a little bit. And I kind of, at one point, I took my shoulder under and did a perfect tuck and roll. So in my mind, the crowd were going 9, 10, 9.5. It was a really good athletic tuck and roll.
Oh, congratulations on the tuck and roll.
Yeah, exactly. The triple Salchow with a half twist. It was great. But then 5, 6 miles later, I realized I was running on adrenaline because I was still mad. The adrenaline fizzled and the sun came out, and then it just got really tough. And then the sun really came out at mile 23. So I toughed it out from mile 18 to 23. And then 23, I just bonked. And then it was just really hard. It was really hot.
Somebody told you you're bleeding. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I actually told him to shut up because I didn't want to know. So I don't want to know. Don't want to know. Thank you. Don't want to know. Thank you. Appreciate it. But don't want to know. Shut up. Yeah. And then I decided that even though I bonked, I was going to run at some awful pace. And I managed to crawl home in 3 hours 44 after doing an hour 40 something, hour 43 or whatever it was, first half.
It's not too bad. It's not a huge, horrible bonk. It's a bonk, but not a...
It's a bonk. But it felt poetic that it was really hard. It was my 6th star. And I'm thinking, it should be hard. It ironically feels a bit like my first marathon. And then we made it to the finish. And because I ran for charity, there was a big party event afterwards, which was cool. That kind of added to the day a little bit. And eventually, somehow, I still don't believe it. I've got the medal over there behind me, but I got a 6-star medal. And
wow, I see it.
Literally ran the world. I actually got interviewed by Abbott TV at the end.
Oh, you did?
Dick was running and they heard my British accent. And they asked me a few questions about the race and the day. I said it was really sweet of Paula to let me beat her to 6 stars because she'll complete it in Boston in a few weeks, which I thought was kind of a dig. But he said, so what did you get out of running the 6 stars? I bet it was a great experience. And I thought about it for a minute. And I guess a closing thought to the 6-star journey is that actually the medals behind me are really cool. And I've had some really brilliant, like long weekends, race days. The thing for me is that I've spent like 10, 12 years making friends, finding a place where I really enjoy the training. And
it's all about the community.
All about the community, all about running with people, all about helping other people as well when it's their marathon set, helping people taper, helping people do long runs.
Yeah.
And I always say to my non-running friends that it might sound a bit crazy, but, and I know you have quite a lot of new runners listen to your podcast as well, but I would say that friends you make that are running are just by definition the best friends. You know, how many friends in your life will show up at 4:30 a.m. if it's raining because they said they would? How many friends would hold the toilet door shut for you when you've had a long run, a toilet issue or something?
Yeah.
More than spare a square, absolutely. But, they'd put up with you when you've bonked or you've twisted an ankle on a long run somewhere. So I've got a lot of good friends in my life. I think the best and most reliable friends are running friends. And to me, that's really what I got out of the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah, and I'll say this because I think this is important. And I love what you said about how building those relationships are key, the community, and exactly what you get out of that, the best of friends. What's next for you?
So I'm not sure if everybody knows this, but again, because I'm a geek, I've followed it. So Abbott apparently will always, I chatted to somebody, so Abbott did a 6-star breakfast celebration thing in Tokyo, which I went to. So I was talking with a couple of the senior Abbott folks, and they're explaining that the 6-star is going to be the 6-star forever. These 6 marathons are also going to generate a 6-star. They know that people are halfway through the journey. They know that it takes 10, 12, 15, 20 years sometimes to get all these things done. So they're not about to change it. But what they said was, with the 3 new stars that they're adding, so they added Sydney last year. Hopefully Cape Town will pass its assessment year this year. So Cape Town will be the 8th, and Shanghai is a year further out. So maybe by 2027, there'll be 3 more majors. So I'm not sure about Shanghai. I'm not keen about the air pollution there, but definitely I'd like to do Sydney. And for sure, I'd love to do Cape Town around Table Mountain, right by the Pacific Ocean. That will be a spectacular marathon. So I'm probably going to do that at some point. But and I know you do this a lot, Chris, as well, but I spent 10 years never being able to pace because I can never waste a marathon set on not trying to qualify for Boston. So I've paced a couple of marathons since I qualified for Boston, and pacing's one of the, especially if it's like a 2-hour or 4-hour, a meaningful time that anybody you get to the finish line that beats that time, it's a huge life moment for them. So I actually get quite a lot out of pacing. It's huge.
It's a lot of fun.
So it's just great to give back as well. I ran out, I think of the Tal Morrison half, and I helped one young guy get below 2 hours, even though it was a hot day and he was hobbling at the end. And you do this a couple of times. You run with people who are new runners. And it turned out that he'd never had the advice about buying bigger shoes. So he was a size 9, he got size 9 shoes, and he was crippling.
It's a big problem. Yeah. That's right.
So, you get to do some coaching to newbie runners as well in some of those things. Yeah. So a lot of pacing. I'll do a couple more global marathons because they're just a lot of fun. But there's a lot to go out in the US as well. So we'll see. But just as you said earlier, the marathons are great and they're a cherry on the cake, but they're not the cake. The cake is what we did this morning, meeting at the track at 6 a.m. And doing intervals and laughing at somebody who's got a toilet problem one day. That's not you, that sort of thing.
You just hope it's not you. That's right.
Yeah. And having a margarita and a taco after a long run on Saturday. That's what I'll be doing.
Andy, the technology is telling us to stop here, but your journey has been great. Your journey to your 6 stars, the world majors, has been pretty amazing. I can't wait to see what you do next. Certainly, you've got a couple others that you're going to go after, but the pacing.
Yeah.